All right, and we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to. Wait, before I do that, let's do this. Excellent. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the special holiday edition live stream of the Grappling with Canada podcast. As usual, although it's been far too long, I'm your host, Andy Dulovich, the Taxman. Now, this is the first live stream that I've ever done for Grappling with Canada, so this is going to be an interesting experience. But the funnest thing, I guess, for you guys will be to see how much I actually edit these programs before I put them out. So it'll be quite the experience tonight. Tonight's going to be a lot of fun for myself personally. We have a few questions that have been asked about the program, about myself, over the last year of some sort of inactivity, unfortunately. I'm going to get to that a little bit later. I'm also going to be talking about things that are upcoming with the program and things that happened in this last season, which kind of led into why there was a little bit of a delayed or truncated season, if you will. But before we get into all that, first off, I want to say, and I see Wrestling with the 80s. Hello, brother. Great to see you as well. Thank you for joining me tonight. Before we get into anything, I need to say a big thank you to everybody who has been checking out the program for the last 3 seasons. It's been quite the experience for myself personally, and it's just been a wild ride. We'll say that it's been a lot more than I ever thought it would be, and a lot of that I owe to the listeners and some viewers tonight of this program. I will also say that if you are not able to watch this program live with us right now, this will be broadcast later. It will also be going up as an audio version on the podcast feed. So if you miss it tonight, don't panic. You're going to be able to get your fix of the Grappling with Canada end of season live show. I also have to apologize if I break it out into a coughing fit at some points tonight. I'm getting over a little something that my wonderful children have blessed me with this holiday season. So hopefully it doesn't cause any headaches, although I am dealing with one right now. You just can't see because I got the tremendous headphones on. But anyways, once again, a big thank you to everybody who's been checking out the program. The growth of the program over the last 3 years, regardless of how much output I've had over the last season specifically, has been tremendous. I'm going to get into that a little bit later. As usual, you can find Grappling with Canada on all the major podcasting platforms, whether that's Spotify, iTunes, or Apple Podcasts, whatever they call it nowadays. Google Podcasts, although that's going away. Basically, wherever you buy, sell, trade, barter, or steal your favorite podcast, you can find Grappling with Canada, as well as right here on the YouTube page, which is a great time to say, like and subscribe to the YouTube page. We are slowly inching, crawling, whatever, our way to 1,000 subscribers. And it would mean a lot to me if while you're watching the video tonight, if you're watching it on a later stream, that you hit that like button, but also that you hit that subscribe button as well. It would mean the world to me as we kind of move forward in the grand scheme of things. Also, if you're joining me tonight, feel free to join me in a beverage, if you will. I'm sure we'll go through several of these tonight as we have fun with the season wrap-up of Season 3. Speaking of the seasons, I should quickly mention, because there are people who have listened to only certain episodes of Season 3, they're not really familiar with any of the back catalog, which now is a great idea, now is a great time, I should say, to kind of give a rundown of what we've done previously. So Season 1, for those who are unfamiliar, as I take a refreshing drink of my beverage, Season 1, we had 12 episodes. They were all dedicated to wrestler showcases. So in Season 1, we had episodes starting with Stu Hart and Stampede Wrestling. We had Dino Bravo. We had Rana Singh. We had, oh my goodness, more than Abdul the Butcher. There was Archie the Stomper Goldie, I should say. Pat Patterson, the list goes on and on. So season 1 was strictly focused on the wrestlers itself. Season 2 had a different bit of a focus in that I had 14 episodes that season. 9 were on wrestlers. It was a bit of a truncated season. For those who are unfamiliar, I ran for city council here in Winnipeg, so it led to a shorter season than I would have wanted, but those are the breaks, if you will. Episodes in that season included a tremendous 2-parter on Roddy Piper. There was episodes on George Gordienko, on the Tolis brothers, which I personally really got a lot out of, and Angelo Mosca, I think, was a great episode on that season. There was also a few specials that I did that year as well on some projects that are in and around Canadian professional wrestling. So one of the guests, for example, that we had was Vance Nevada with his book Uncontrolled Chaos that came out this year. Just like literally a Bible of if you've ever seen this thing, it's tick, as they say, very tick. But it's essentially a Bible of Canadian professional wrestling history, stats, match listings, you name it, it's on there. Yes, Wrestling with the 80s, it is a tremendous book. And Vance has, boy, oh boy, he outkicked his coverage on that one, I think. I don't know how he's going to top it. I have a little bit of an idea what he has coming up in the future, but man, oh man, that guy just puts out amazing work. So it was great to see that. Great to get our physical hands on that one. Shoot, that one's upstairs. It's not in my wrestling collection. Right behind me, I got a big collection of books. If you can see, there's some there anyways, but that one is upstairs, so I'll have to get that later. Yes, BC. But I figured we were going to kayfabe you a little bit there, BC. So, by the way, while you're on here and you can see in the chat, Wrestling with 80s, go ahead and check out that channel. If you're a fan of wrestling from the 80s, as the pod or name of the title says, BC does a tremendous job of like going through. He has video snippets. He has just I can't put it into words. What he does in terms of production for that program that he does is mind-boggling. And he managed to slide me in there in one episode, which was absolutely tremendous. I saw that you just had one come out on the Intercontinental Championship reigns. By the way, I got to check that one out. I haven't done that yet. Okay, so getting back to season 2. So season 2, yeah, like I said, 9 episodes were on wrestlers. We had a bunch of special episodes. It was truncated because of the city council run. Now, season 3, big time step back. I only had 4 episodes of season 3, and that was the Bruiser Bob Sweetan one. More on that in a second. The Great Antonio. We had, I got to think what I had for episodes. Oh, yeah, Dave McKigney, the Bearman, and also the Lewisport incident, where obviously the big name killed in that episode or that incident was Adrian Adonis. So why 4 episodes this last season? There's been a few questions, and I'm going to get to some listener questions a little bit later on in the program. By the way, if you're watching this live right now with me, if you want to drop a question in the chat, I'll make sure that I get to it in the episode tonight. So season 4, why was it so short? Well, number 1 was the subject matter on some of them. This is more specifically talking about the Bob Sweetan episode. Now that one had some interesting reactions, we'll say. Many people were quite positive about the approach that it took on the episode, which was to present the facts as they were laid out, right? I didn't put a lot of personal opinion on it. I didn't use a lot of conjecture. Actually, I don't think I used any conjecture at all. I didn't use any rumors, no innuendo. I just went with the facts, including the actual court ruling against him in Texas when he was found guilty of assaulting his child, we'll just say, to put it that way. So I was happy with the episode. It took a long time to produce because I had to find ways to talk about the subject matter without interjecting my own personal opinions on it, which I I have a hard time doing sometimes. I'm quite opinionated, if anybody hasn't realized that at this point. But I tried very hard to make sure that that episode was presented factually correctly. First of all, factually correctly, because I felt like that really needed to be said. And second of all, I wanted to make sure that it was presented in a context that gave the fulsome story, right? You can't talk about Bruiser Bob Sweetan, the perpetrator, we'll say, without talking about Bruiser Bob Sweetan and what a main name he was, especially in Southwestern wrestling, right? Like he was a big time star, a massive heel. He was over. Like you can't deny it, right? It's the same thing as the Chris Benoit comparison. And you know what? I had a few people email me about, oh, you covered Sweetan, would you cover Benoit? More on that in a second. Or people trying to make the false equivalency that, oh, you can't talk about Sweetan just because of whatever. We still talk about Benoit and he, killed his family kind of thing, which to me, that's a false equivalency. I don't see that you can compare the two. I mean, what they both did equally are horrible. One is on a bigger scale, in my opinion. So in terms of would I ever cover, I should just get this out of the way. Would I ever cover Chris Benoit? I don't know. And, that's one that I've been getting emails over the years about if I would cover it or not. I don't know, to be honest. That would depend on the direction of the episode, or the direction that I wanted the episode to take, I guess is a better way to discuss it. There's one book that I'm aware of that has actually been written properly, and I believe Greg Oliver had something to do with it. If he wasn't the principal writer, then he was one of the main individuals involved in it. And I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head right now. But anyways, if I was going to do a Benoit episode, it would probably follow something similar to that layout of that book. But again, that one's a tough one, right? I can't, and a lot of people have said to me over the years, like, oh, why can't you just talk about the wrestling? And I've even heard that on other episodes I've done, right? I did the episode, again, in season 4 of The Great Antonio, for example. I put a ton of information, a ton of backstory. I had a guest on, David Williams from Fireside Canada, whose speciality, if you will, is Canadian folklore and Canadian legends. So he was on and he was talking about, the French Canadian strongman and how that strongman persona really played into the gravitas that Great Antonio had in Montreal. In my opinion, I couldn't tell the Great Antonio story without exploring why that strongman mentality or that strongman spirit was so vibrant and so alive in Montreal. So I had David Williams in on that one, and he did a fantastic job of really explaining a lot of that. Case in point, I had people emailing, well, why'd you put all that in? The episode was long-ish, I guess, for not really long in terms of, some of the episodes I've done over the years, but I felt that I couldn't tell that story without that aspect. So that's kind of my thought process in going into something. If I was going to cover Benoit, right, I can't just talk about his wrestling. I have to talk about the whole story. So that's kind of why I'm lenient on doing a Benoit episode. I'm not saying never. I'm just saying, right now I got a lot of things on my plate that I think are more important to deal with, if you will. All right. Now, the other reason why season 4 was very limited was the amount of research that went into the episodes. So this is something that's been kind of a reoccurring issue over the seasons, and this kind of lends itself to to a question that's asked later in the program that I'll get into on my trusty note sheet here. But when I did this season specifically, there was a lot of research that went into, well, the Great Antonio one specifically took a ton of time, right? You're pouring through archival information. I'm waiting for uh, information from the Montreal Museum. There's back and forth between us. They were tremendous, by the way. Just things were slow moving, right? Then it's cross referencing that information to what I had previous, to what other people have reported. Then it's going through newspaper clippings and trying to cross reference where those fit into everything. Then you factor in the Japanese angle. All of this to say is that one episode, and I think it was almost 2 hours of runtime, probably took me 3 months to research, um, cross reference all the information, find everything that I wanted to find. Then getting guests, which the guests on that one were tremendous. Again, David Williams and Javier Oist, a great friend of the show, was on that one as well. But it's figuring out how to present it. So that episode alone probably took me 3 months just to get done, which is that's a lot of time, right? The Bruiser Bob Sweetan episode, obviously that one took a little bit longer, but again, because there's a lot of fact checking that was done. And I'm not saying that anything that Greg Oliver had, who was my guest on that episode, I'm not saying that anything that he had was wrong, but I wanted to make sure that it was right. And so that took a lot of time to, again, cross-reference, and then I was able to find the Texas, his actual folder, or not folder, but the actual dossier from or legal dossier from Texas, which explained everything that he did. So that one took a little bit of time. Then we had the Dave McKigney episode. I had a great friend of the show, Wes Mayment from the NWCA podcast. More on them a little bit later. That one came together pretty quick, mostly because Wes is such a treasure trove of information about Dave McKigney. So that one was really, really simple to get through. But the one following it, the Lewisport incident episode, that was a hard one to get through. Not so much for the research aspect. I mean, there's not much to research, right? I had the date, I had most of the information, most of which was wrong. I'll get to that in a second, but it was more about getting the firsthand accounts of the people who were there. And that took some doing. And how can I put this? That episode doesn't work without the individuals who were on the episode as guests, the citizens who were living in Lewisport at the time who responded to the crash. I'm thinking of, well, the three that were on was Joanne, Dawn, and Raymond. And, there were other people who had reached out to me that, originally wanted to join the program. And then they ended up deciding against it because it was, the memories were too raw. And I totally understood that. And I was okay with it. So there was a lot of treading lightly, because I didn't want to offend anybody. First off, because it's their trauma. It's not mine, and I wasn't there very, very clearly. So I had to approach it in a certain way. So I gave a lot of people a lot of leeway to, I gave them a lot of time to, once they said they wanted to do it, okay, please make sure you actually want to do it. And so there was a lot of leeway. So I took my time, took far longer than I probably normally would if I was trying to, coordinate an interview with somebody, but I felt like that was a prudent thing to do. What I ended up with was 3 heart-wrenching interviews, to be honest with you. And there was boy, oh boy, there was a lot of stuff that I edited out of those interviews. They didn't alter the interview itself, but there was details that I left out, because I don't think that they would have added anything to the program, and I think it would have been more distressing if I would have let them in. you know, while I'm in the conversation with the person who is talking about their story, their experience, what happened to them, and what they experienced during that time, I'm not going to tell them to stop and oh, I don't think we should go into that. It was very much a free flowing idea of, okay, what did you see? What do you want to tell? And a lot of those conversations, two specifically, went almost an hour. And then, I edited them down for posterity's sake for the program. But there was a lot of heavy matter that was left out. So if while what was in the episode was uh, very distressing to hear, there were a lot of things that I had left out of it, which I didn't think added anything, but I also didn't think that having those taken out of the program would take away the effect that the interviews would have on the listener. So that's why I kind of made the decision that I made. Now, it is interesting that that is one of the episodes that I've had the most positive feedback on out of almost every episode that I've done through all 3 seasons of Grappling with Canada. One, because of how I approached the episode. Two, because I actually let the people talk, and they've never had a chance to do that before. And one of the most flattering compliments I got was actually from Adrian Adonis's daughter, who reached out to me, and she was blown away by the episode. She actually was conversing with me, after the episode, to get the individuals' information who were on the episode. I forwarded to them, and actually she's going to be meeting with them in the future, I believe, which is like, what a cool story. The daughter of someone who passed tragically, who's been, without this information for 35 years, kind of has a little bit of closure, and is now able to connect with the individuals who helped her dad. Like, to me, that's, my God, what do you say about that? So I was, you know, beyond humbled to just be a conduit for that. And I'm looking forward to hearing any stories that that those individuals have when they end up meeting up, because wow, what a thing. And all because of a podcast. That's wild. And you know what, maybe I should get into that as well. This trip through hysteria that I've been on, 3 seasons. What are we at? 12, 14. That's what, 26, 30 episodes essentially. And, it's the podcast has been heard in like over 170 countries worldwide. I think we're at some like 50,000, listens, downloads, whatever you want to say. And then, I also have to take a break and also mention a great friend of the show, Thomas Bryce from Sportswire Radio, because we're also heard on, an international radio station, which is crazy to me. Like, this guy from Winnipeg who, podcasts out of a closet, which, you can see right behind me, is able to have this amount of reach. And, that's not counting, YouTube and whatever it's on, terrestrial internet radio. Like, it's wild to me, and I'm blown away by the whole experience. So, yeah, I'm almost speechless by it. We'll just say that, and that really gets me excited for season 4, which I'm going to get to a little bit later. I also want to make mention that I had a couple of guest appearances over the last couple of seasons. So, one I should mention, he's in the chat right now, BC, from Wrestling with the Truth. He had me on a couple of times. We had some interesting discussions. One of my favorite ones was regarding the state of current professional wrestling. It was a very interesting conversation. I was able to have a guest spot on a great friend of the show, Jacob's show, the Sunday Night Army. He did an episode actually on podcasters and their tastes in music, if you will. And that was a great episode. Ended up sending in an audio clip to that one, and he was gracious enough to put that on the program, and that was a lot of fun. I was also on a program of the National Wrestling Clippings Alliance podcast. That one is hosted by Wes and Jess, who were actually guests on my program in season 2. They were on the Whipper Billy Watson episode, as well as Wes was on the episode in season 4. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Season 3, the Dave McKigney episode. I joined Wes on. We actually ran down a card from Winnipeg from the 80s, and that one was a ton of fun. I think we were supposed to go an hour. I think we went like 2.5. My kids were jumping in. My cat showed up. It was a good time. But again, it's crazy that via this podcast I have a chance now to interact and talk to other podcasters. I talk to authors all the time, other historians all the time. I'm getting mail all the time. And it's just, what a wild ride. What a crazy experience this has all been. And it's very, very, very rewarding and well worth it, in my opinion. I see in the chat here, BC, Benoit's a tough topic, but I have the confidence. Well, I think I would handle it the right way. Yeah, and no matter what topic, you do have trolls, sadly. Yeah, and you know what? I'm sure that you see it on your channel as well, right? You're going to get trolled. It doesn't matter. You can put the most positive story out there, and some yahoo is going to jump on there to be an a-hole, and you kind of just have to roll with it. And he also says, no holds barred, our conversation about current professional wrestling. Yes, it was no holds barred. And, it's funny. I don't swear on the Grappling With Canada programs, not because because I don't, they need to be kind of like family friendly or whatever, but Jesus, you get me off the program or you get me on a tangent about something I'm real passionate about. What can I say? Things happen and expletives fly, unfortunately. So sorry about that, BC, but we had a fun time anyways on that episode. All right. Now I suppose this is a good as point as any to list off some listener questions that I've gotten over the past few months. So because we've been dormant, a lot of the questions have been like, what's going on with the program, basic stuff, right? Which is, something that I explained already earlier in the program tonight. So I'm not going to get into that, but I do have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 good ones. Well, I deem good ones at least that I'm going to answer tonight. And if there's any more and you guys want to leave them in the chat, go ahead. And even if it's after the fact, if you want to email me, you can email me at any time, sixsidepod@gmail.com. You can also leave a question in the video chat after this episode's done. If you want something asked, I'm happy to answer it. Or you can hit me on any of the social media platforms, whether that's Google, not Google, I should say, Facebook, on Twitter or X or whatever they call it. More on that one in a second, actually. I got to talk about that for a second. Instagram, Threads, I'm on there, though I'm not very active. Essentially any social media site. If you got a question, I'm happy to answer, and I'm happy to help out with research as well. I've been contacted a few times in the last few months about individuals that I've covered in the past that people have been looking for more information on, or are trying to clarify something for a program that they're working on, which I think is very cool. So I've been able to help out a little bit that way, which has been, again, it's pretty rewarding. Twitter. Yeah, we're going to get into that one, actually. I'm going to start with this one. So this one comes from Des Latham, who, by the way, if you're interested at all in World War II, which I'm a massive World War II nerd, I guess is a good way to put it. Des Latham had an incredible podcast series on the Battle of Stalingrad. I think he went there's 30 episodes, I think. This is a few years ago. And it's mind-blowingly good, really well narrated, really well researched. It was just a fantastic series. And he's got other stuff. He's from South America, he's from South Africa, I should say. and he's got some interesting takes on some world events. So, anyways, if you're a fan of World War II, check out Battle of Stalingrad by Des Latham. I highly encourage that one. So he had asked for a first time listener, which episode would you recommend to listen to first? Well, that's an interesting question because I'm kind of jaded a little bit. And it kind of depends on the listener too, right? Some people are very interested in the dark side of things, right? We saw a huge influx in that specific genre thanks to Dark Side of the Ring, for example, or the Territory show, or some of the 80 biographies. People seem to be drawn in wrestling to the darker aspects of it. A lot of my episodes really haven't dealt with that so much. Obviously, the Bruiser Bob Sweetan one is the darkest episode I have. There's no two ways about that. I guess another one would be the Chief Don Eagle episode. Obviously, his murder is one that, to this day it's an unsolved murder, right? So there's that as well. Dino Bravo at the end of that one. Oh, and by the way, I should say, I have to also give a shout out to, oh shoot, which is it now? You know what? I'm going to pull that up in a second, and I'll talk about the Dino episode or Dino Bravo episode in a second. But there was an episode of the. This is compelling audio, I know, when you're looking at somebody trying to find something real quick on their computer. I can't find it now. Oh, the Gangsters podcast. So they had done an episode on Dino Bravo. They used some of my information for that one on their program. We're going to be collaborating in the future on another Canadian crime story involving professional wrestling that might be in a few months if we can get our schedules together. So I was happy to help out with their program. So again, a lot of my programs aren't really of the dark variety, but those are 3 examples of something where if that's your kind of thing, then those episodes are kind of up your alley. In my opinion, a great episode, if you've never listened to anything professional wrestling related or Canadian history related or anything like that, a good start is probably an episode like the Ronda Singh one. In my opinion, somebody who, a little bit less known, but like what a tremendous story. And, obviously the end of her life was, really, really cut short. She passed away way too young. But, someone who, what a meteoric rise, somebody who legitimately went from watching wrestling in Calgary to performing at the highest levels in Japan within a span of like 5 years. It's really awe-inspiring, and her run as the Monster Ripper, in Japan and in WWC, Puerto Rico, it's really, really inspiring. So I would tend to lean to something towards that, as well as the Billy Two Rivers episode. And that's simply for the fact that, I was able to have a long conversation with him. And unfortunately, we lost him this past year back in February. So, here's somebody who, whose story was never really fully explored before. I was, really lucky to be able to interview him, to allow him to tell his story. And now it's preserved for history. And, that's an episode where I still get messages and emails from, great grandchildren or long lost relatives that, they're just on Google looking for information about him. They find the YouTube video, right? They find the podcast and they're learning about him that way. So that's one where it's like that's the whole point of doing this, right? Just what a story. So anyways, that might be a good one if it was your first time ever listening, Ronda Singh or Billy Two Rivers. Those are probably the top 2 that I would recommend if this is your first time listening to the program. James had asked, why are you why are you no longer active on Twitter? Well, X Twitter, whatever they call it now. You know what? I used to be really active on that. I still have, I think, a fairly good following on there, but ever since Elon bought that thing and went crazy, like I get no use out of Twitter at all. Uh, outside of 800 notifications a day. Uh, there's no value for me in Twitter anymore. I used to put out a tweet and it would get a few thousand responses or not responses but interactions or whatever they call it. Right now, I put something out, it gets like 11. I'm like, forget it. There's just no value in that. For me personally, I'm most active in the Canadian Professional Wrestling History Facebook group, just because I see a lot of value out of that. Not for my program at all, to be honest, but because there's so much other cool stuff that happens in there. So that's where I'm most active. But yeah, Twitter used to be excellent, and it's not just me, right? It seems like Twitter just like killed all interactions for podcasters. This like ever since Elon took it over, it's wild to me. So it used to be super good. The wrestling community, fickle as they are, used to be really good on Twitter. The podcasting community on Twitter used to be excellent. Everybody was, helping everybody out. There was a lot of tips. There was a lot of information. And ever since Elon bought it, it's like he just gutted the podcast side of it, and the interaction is not there. So I have no real value. I still have it. It's there. You can contact me on it, but I don't really see any value in using Twitter as a means to further the podcast. So that's the answer for that one. Cindy had asked, what is happening with the website? Funny you should ask. So I've had a kind of a chintzy free website that I used for a few years. I think it's still active, but it's not anything. It's not good. There's no two ways about it. But the reality is, the podcast doesn't really generate money, right? So I can't really. I already pay for publishing for the podcast. I have to pay for equipment for the podcast. I have to pay for all my research materials. I have newspaper subscriptions. I have books I have to buy. I have all this stuff. I have a lot of expenses that go into the podcast. And I don't really think that while the website would be nice as a hosting ground, it's not really in a budget for me right now. Maybe that changes in the future. It would be great. If the podcast, generated a little bit more than it did, then maybe I could look at a website. I'm very grateful to have my sponsorship with Manscaped. At least that, kind of helps pay for publishing and some of the offset some of my costs. But the reality is, you factor in publishing, you factor in research, you factor in all these subscriptions, then you try and factor in a yearly cost for a website. It's just not feasible right now. Would I love to do it? Yes, for sure. Is it a must? I don't know. It probably is, but I can't see the cost benefit value right now. So maybe in the future, but not right now. But thanks for that question, Cindy. Steve asks, would you ever consider shorter episodes? So this will play into my teaser about season 4 a little bit, but I want to expand on, this question about, how to shorten up episodes or change length of episodes. So there's been a few people over the years, like Steve's not the only one. There's been a few people who have asked, oh God, I love the episodes, but like some of them are like 3 hours long and I don't have 3 hours. And, I hate pausing something and then picking it up later, which I get to a point. Is there a way you could break it up? But I don't see how I could do that, because how do you break up an interview in progress in an episode without losing your spot of, or your train of thought, or your what's the word I'm looking for? or you're being in the moment of that episode, of that interview. How do you get that back when you've stepped out of it because it's taken an episode break, right? And then, join us next week for our, continuing interview in progress. To me, I don't think that it would add anything. I think you would actually lose quite a bit of the program, in terms of listenability, in terms of engagement, and not engagement in terms of like, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, social media. I'm talking about engagement, you listening and enjoying the program. I feel like you would lose that if, there was just all of a sudden a break in the middle of an interview and it's, oh, tune in next week for this. Well, would you come back? I don't know. Maybe if you're really interested, but I feel like, why even set up that roadblock if I don't have to? You know what I mean? So that's kind of the way that I look at that. Now, shorter episodes is something that we may be diving into in season 4, and I will give a bit of a teaser for season 4 in just a minute. But I do see a question in the chat, so I'm going to get to this one right here. BC asks, which episode did you finally feel like you hit your comfort zone and felt the podcast was delivering what you originally intended it to be? Boy, that's a fantastic question. Oh man, what episode did I don't think I've ever felt like I've been like that I've hit a comfort zone yet, to be honest with you. Yeah, it's weird, right? I can do the research, I can do the interviews, I can put the program together, but I'm never comfortable with the episode until it's out, almost, right? Like I never yeah, I never feel like I've done enough in an episode, if that makes any sense. Right? I always feel like, oh, I could have put that one more detail in, or I could have put more focus on this, or I always have that feeling until the episode's out. And part of that is an editing issue, editing myself, certainly. But in terms of, yeah, comfortable, I've never felt comfortable just, sitting in the chair and just going. That's not really my style on this. And I think that has to do a lot more of just, my personal picadillo of making sure that, the information's correct, that I'm presenting it properly, that I'm not, accentuating the wrong things, et cetera, et cetera. But the other part of the question, when I felt like the podcast was delivering what it originally intended to be, probably the tail end of season 1. There's a lot of season 1 was kind of me finding my feet a little bit, not in terms of like, I'm an amateur, I don't know what I'm doing. I had previous podcasting experience before Grappling with Canada. I did, although it wasn't, in my opinion, it wasn't that great, but I did some, Impact Wrestling stuff like back in 2018 or whatever. But so I didn't approach Grappling with Canada as any kind of amateur or anything like that, but I really felt like by maybe the Abdullah the Butcher episode of season 1, I felt like I started to get a really good mix of, the archival audio with the guests, with the direction of the program, I felt the proper amount of wrestling history of the individual combined with the personal history of the individual. I think that's probably the Abdullah the Butcher episode. Maybe the Ronda Singh one. I can't remember which one came first. Also, and that's horrible because I've only put out 30 of these. I should know which order they were in. But I would say probably one of those two episodes where I really felt like I hit a stride and, okay, this is what I want it to be. And then I moved forward from there. Now, obviously the ones that kind of are the outliers are, those special episodes that I had in season 2 where I was interviewing authors and some website curators and all that kind of thing. Those were a little bit different, a little bit more free flowing, and I didn't really have to, I don't want to say put the effort in. That's not a fair way to say it, but I didn't have to put in the amount of research that one of the long form episodes would take. So those were a bit different. But yeah, I would say this is a very, very, very long-winded response to the original question, which, yeah, probably the Abdul the Butcher episode or the Ronda Singh episode. That's when I felt like, okay, here's what I want it to be, and kind of build on that moving forward in the future. Now, speaking of the future, I don't want to keep you guys all night. It is a Friday night. I'm sure some of you have lives. I have kids, so I don't really have a life. And I'm dying, as you can see. My goodness, you gotta love when your kids bring home special presents from school for you. But so season 4, what the hell's happening with season 4? There will be a season 4. I will say that right off the bat. I have an interview that's been in the can for the last 3 months that I just haven't had a chance to edit, put it together, whatever. So that will come out on January 1st. I promise you. Finally, I'm going to make a deadline. On January 1st, there will be a new episode of Grappling with Canada, which will be timely because there's a certain Hall of Fame that will be inducting members, I think in the, what would that be, late March, early April range. This vaunted Hall of Fame, a non-physical Hall of Fame, but a Hall of Fame nonetheless. And an individual who really should be in that Hall of Fame. And this episode is essentially an argument of why this individual must be included in the Hall of Fame. And, with the change in ownership of this company, with this Hall of Fame ceremony that's going to be coming up in the future, we'll see if this person gets inducted in the posthumous category, because they should have been in there a long, long time ago. It's a long time coming. And I'm hoping that, a few months out, I'm not saying that this program is going to change the world or anything, but, it might be one more arrow in the set of quivers that helps propel this individual into that Hall of Fame. So January 1st, look forward for that one. There's another interview that I am owed to somebody. I'm hoping to have that one for February. I'm hoping that that he's still able to do that episode. I'd hate for it to go. I'd hate for a story to not be told, right? And I'm going to digress just for a second. I'll get back to the rest of season 4 in a second. But, it's one thing to go through, someone who's passed on, like a Jack Taylor, or, like a Ronda Singh, or like a Chief Don Eagle, and, reconstitute their past, put it into a cohesive story, tell the truth, most important, and lay out what they meant in professional wrestling. It's one thing to do that. It's a completely other thing to have the person tell their story. Case in point, the Billy to Rivers episode, right? I want to make a concerted effort moving forward to be more of an outlet for past wrestlers to be able to tell their story. Because the reality is, if they don't tell it, someone's going to tell it for them. And that somebody might not have their best interests in mind, or they might only be telling a certain part of that story. So it's almost imperative that we start, trying to save these things, because again, when these individuals, when these men and women pass on, it's gone, right? And unless somebody's done their due diligence and, either talk to them personally, or done a real good job. Jamie Greer, I should say, somebody who's doing a tremendous job documenting the history of Windsor wrestling, Windsor, Ontario. He's had, I don't know what he said, a few thousand interviews for his book, and one of the people is somebody who that I had inquired about. Hey, I should get this person on the program. Well, now they're in hospice, and I don't even know if they're alive anymore. And that person's story now thank God Jamie has it. And I hope that he's able to expand on it. And, maybe I do something with him later. But, if he didn't get it, nobody would have had it, would have had that person's story. So that all being said, I want to make a concerted effort moving forward, in season 4. If there are individuals out there that are listening to this and you have a story to tell, or you have, your father, your mother was a former professional wrestler, your grandfather, your grandmother, whatever, and they have a story to tell, to me, that's kind of what this program almost needs to be, right? It's great to do the biographical back work on people, but man, if we could get these stories from the person while they're still here, like that's the way to go, in my opinion. So season 4, I want to make a concerted effort of that. Again, I owe somebody an episode. I'm going to be doing that one, providing he's still in. I got to touch base with him. Also in season 4, there's going to be some, we'll say, mini-series. 2 mini-series I'm planning. One is strictly based on an email I got inquiring if I knew any information about a wrestler and their murder, and that murder having something to do with a murder for hire plot involving an RCMP Big Brother sting. It sounds confusing, but it took me down a whole host of rabbit holes. So I'm looking forward to presenting that one. That's that's an episode where it makes sense to do it in I don't even know what it's going to end up being. Maybe a 4-part series. That one made sense to make it episodic and do a small series on it. Another one, I'm working very closely with a few individuals about the roots of professional wrestling. We'll say pre-Canada in the nation that we now call Canada. I'm just gonna leave that teaser out there, and if you figure it out, shoot me a message. Let me know if you figured it out. But I think those 2 miniseries, and then if I can get some more live interviews, I think that's the way to go moving forward in season 4. There are a few biographical episodes that I've been working on, some of which have been on the back burner for 2 years. I'm thinking about Don Jardine. BC will know exactly what I'm talking about on that one. I'm still looking at getting that one done. Again, it's just, there's a lot on my plate, if you will. How many episodes season 4 will end up being? More than 4. Probably not more than 14. So there's your range. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to doing in the future. If anybody else has anything in the chat they want to leave, go ahead and leave that. But I'm going to start wrapping this thing up. First off, by saying thank you, the viewer and the listener. Without your support, there's no way I could do this thing. And there, quite frankly, be no point to do this thing. If you guys and gals weren't listening, weren't passing it along, weren't talking about it, weren't engaging with it, weren't sharing your stories, then this would be a fruitless endeavor, which it has not been. And that, once again, is all thanks to you. So my personal utmost thanks to you, the viewer, thanks to you, the listener, for tuning in to Grappling with Canada. If you haven't yet, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel on this YouTube link. If you listen to this on any of the major podcasting platforms, do me a favor and hit the follow button on that platform. Don't ask me why. It's something about algorithmic mumbo jumbo jargon, but it helps the program immensely. Also, if you want to leave a 5-star written review, that would be very much appreciated as well. You can also find Grappling with Canada on Facebook. There's a Facebook group. Canadian Professional Wrestling History is where you can find that. It's not specifically related to this podcast, so there but there is a whole ton of cool stuff that is on there, constantly posted. Like I said earlier, Jamie Greer, who's been doing some tremendous stuff with the history of wrestling in Windsor, has been adding, like, my God, just tons of stuff. So that's been great. Come check out our Facebook group there. You can also like the Grappling with Canada Facebook page, and you can find us on all other social media platforms. Simply search for Grappling with Canada. So for myself, the Taxman, once again, thank you everybody for a very successful seasons 1, 2, and 3. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing all of you in season 4. Season 4. It's got a nice ring to it, if you will. All right, everyone. I'm going to let you go. Have a great night. Have a very safe and happy holidays. And I look forward to chatting with all of you in the very near future. As I always say, please take care of yourselves and each other. Good night, everyone.